Single player games are far more appealing to me than any game with multiplayer components. The more a game requires me to participate in something involving other people, especially if they're online strangers, the less I'm probably interested in playing it from the jump. Team based, squad play, PvP. If I see these words in a game's description, I'm automatically out. I just do not play well with others, nor do I really have the desire anymore to try. It would actually be far easier to list the exceptions to my attitude than it would be to list all the games I probably will never try. The first are games that are multiplayer in the classic players 1 to 4 way that used to be printed on the back of the game case. If you can still play the game alone, games like Left 4 Dead, Dark Alliance, Dead Island, Path of Exile, or the newer Diablos, I'm usually happy to write it off and hope no one other than my closest friends asks me to play it with them sometime if they find out I like those games. Elden Soulsborne likes would be another. I immediately turn off every option that links me to other players. What I do love, actually, is the messaging. Any game where the extent of player to player interaction is leaving messages for another is lovely. It's not live. I don't have to put my phone on Do Not Disturb or grow anxious about not responding out of social politeness. I can appreciate their advice or have a good laugh, give them the particular game's equivalent of a like, and move on. Party games like Mario Kart, Smash Bros, or Jackbox are probably the truest exception here, where I actually find myself playing a game with other people. The final exception is some MMORPGs. RuneScape, MapleStory, Elder Scrolls Online, Star Wars The Old Republic, Fly for Fun. I come back to these games every now and then, and when I do, I treat them almost like a solo experience. I don't make friends, join a guild, or interact in any chat. I treat player-run merchant booths like randomly generated NPC stores, turn on a podcast, and get to click in so I can see those numbers go up. Now, that list probably seems like a lot of exceptions, and that's fair, but what it means for my day to day is that anytime I'm sitting down to enjoy a video game, I'm most likely, 99 times out of 100, if you want to give it a number, going to play something that only needs a player 1 to have fun. And something about all of that leaves a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. This behavior on its own might not concern me. It might not even concern you. What are you so worried about, Patrick? You might think. Plenty of people only prefer games catered to a solo experience. Some of the best games ever made. A lot of the best of all times. You can't even have a player 2. There's nothing wrong with that. And you'd be right. There is nothing wrong alone with preferring a single kind of game for almost any reason. We all might have preferences of art style, music, gameplay, genre, studio size, to the point where we might dismiss games that are the opposite of our favorites. My biggest one just happens to be player number. What really concerns me is twofold. The first is that it wasn't always like this for me. Quite enough of my weeknights and weekends in middle school and high school were devoted to online rounds of Halo 3, Call of Duty World at War, or any of the Rock Band games. Later in life, I even played quite a lot of early Overwatch and Fortnite. I have hundreds of hours in Team Fortress 2 and Garry's Mod. If you track the hours during school summer breaks I spent waiting for lobbies like it was a full-time job, you would have certainly fired me for working too much overtime. All of the MMOs I talked about soloing before used to be social hubs for me as well. At some point, seemingly around my mid-20s, something changed. This fact is heavily linked with the second thing that seems to bother me. Not the behavior of preferring single game experiences itself, but the heavy loaded one word question. Why? Why am I so partial to sticking by myself when it comes to leisure? Why am I not interested in playing a whole slew of games I used to apparently very much enjoy? What does it all say about me as a person? There are at least two options of the direction I could go to find this answer. One option goes in the direction of inquiring about how the nature of online gaming has evolved over the past decade or so. Maybe something about the alleged increase in toxic and dehumanizing attitude of players in matches, free-to-play games engaging in predatory business practices that encourage you spending far more than you would if it had just been a one-time purchase or monthly subscription, social media and software like Discord decentralizing and splintering gaming communities to where you can feel isolated playing a game if you're not a busy bee on one or all of them. But I don't really want to do that. Maybe some of the things I said are even true and have affected some of my soloist attitude. But where one finger points at something else, 3 are always going to point back. It doesn't suit me in general to be outwardly critical, And I think in this particular instance, it just benefits me far more to ask questions introspectively in order to get somewhere. And my hope, as always, to you watching or listening, is that this Emmaus walk through philosophy and my own thoughts can be fruitful to you as well. After a lot of self reflection, I believe a significant portion of why I have progressed to mostly seeking out solo gaming experiences is due to how I have changed as a person. In my younger years, I was far more of an extroverted and outgoing person. I had a lot more social energy, and I received a lot more enjoyment from social outings. A lot more of my value was placed in how others saw me, and not necessarily how I thought of myself. In fact, how I viewed myself was mostly based on whatever other people I thought were important said about me. If someone thought I was fun, funny, intelligent, and personable, then it had to be true. Any social rejection was proof that I was not as great of a person as I thought I was. This applied to gaming just as well. I wanted to be someone that was agreeable to play with, that made good jokes at the right times, knew the game well so I could help my teammates out, and didn't fight over loot or complain about losing and blame others for my shortcomings. I wanted to be the type of person with a huge friends list, where dozens of people got excited whenever I logged in, and would jump me to ask to join their game. For reasons fairly outside of gaming, that season began to change. As a human being, you can only make so many mistakes, or be at the expense of someone else's, before you start to lose trust in others and depend on them less. This is a tale as old as time. Friendship and strong social bonds are at once the most majestic mountain peaks of human existence and its deepest and harshest trenches. Even for me, who was fairly dependent on the feelings of others, there was a point where constantly thinking everyone else around you sucks, or that everyone around you thinks that you suck, was not conducive to being a healthy human being. I struggled with self-loathing, but eventually the straw broke the camel's back, and I went the exact opposite way. The committee of my mind, formerly composed of chairmen who constantly appealed to the outside for its identity, was all laid off and replaced with a bunch of bleach blonde, tattoo-laden, cigarette-ripping punks who were of the isolationist persuasion. And if I'm going to be in charge and only take care of me, then maybe a lot of the recreation time I've spent at the service of others needs to go too. Is that the whole story? Is the answer just that I'm a scarred, imperfect person whose life experience has shaped the kind of media they enjoy? This meeting could have been an email. I think that probably this is mostly the answer. Who we are and the art that we choose to interact with are undeniably in a continuous relationship. We like the things we do because of the kind of person we are, and those things make us more of who we are. And so we go on to find more art that speaks to us, and that song and dance repeats. But something about this current melody for me isn't completely harmonious just yet. I didn't necessarily want to stay on this island of personality I'd crafted for myself. I had built more self-worth than I had in my entire life. I had finally become my number one fan, and was entirely on my own side and looking out for my best interests. That exterior social pressure had eventually made a diamond, but this isn't the final chapter of the book of my life, as far as I know. My study of philosophy has been an important catalyst in this journey of self-rediscovery. My primary focus in graduate school has been on existentialist philosophy, which may not come as a surprise to anyone familiar based on what I just shared about my journey inside of myself. Existentialism and its thinkers always have something to say when it comes to the individual, the self, that one solitary person, you and me, trying to figure out who we are in this messy world. A large portion of these figures came to the conclusion that there was something about other people that actually gets in the way of individuals trying to figure out who they are. Soren Kierkegaard is a rather clear example of this. In quite a few works, he repeats the phrase, "the crowd is untruth." This is especially evident in a smaller piece called "On the Dedication to That Solitary Individual." He says, "A crowd is untruth, since a crowd either renders the single individual wholly unrepentant and irresponsible, or weakens his responsibility by making it a fraction of his decision. By dedicating ourselves to any sort of group, he thinks we can feel strengthened by the numbers we become backed by, supported and encouraged by finding others that we share some commonality with, and the fact that responsibility seems to dissolve equally among the ranks. But this membership comes at a grave cost. The more we participate in a social legion, the more we give up of our own identity. If I stay attached to some assembly for too long, after some time I would become a lot less Patrick and a lot more of a faceless number. There comes to a point in a crowd where our individuality and uniqueness stops contributing to a group's efforts or benefit, where we could be replaced by just about anyone, and the machine would keep on moving. And so, Kierkegaard is fairly adverse to any sort of crowd mentality. And if you can't find the truth about yourself by looking at a lot of people, then it must be the opposite that finds you that truth. In his masterpiece titled Concluding Unscientific Postscript, Kierkegaard supports the natural other side to his idea. Truth is subjectivity, he says. The truth of you and the world you're living in comes not from how things objectively are, that is, how anything really is. Instead, it comes entirely from your own personal experience and processing of reality. At the end of the day, what really should matter to you about everything around you is what you think it all is, or what it all means. In the same book, he even says that it's a dumb and frivolous pursuit to try to directly teach other people what the ultimate meaning of life might be. You can lead a horse to the absolute truth of reality, but you can't make them drink. The choice is theirs. So, other people are great and all, and there certainly seems to be a lot of merit to having meaningful relationships. But at the end of the day, you should just be your own best friend first and foremost. And only spending time with yourself and reflecting inward is going to unveil more about who you truly are. The rest is a pleasant distraction. The best way for me to encounter art and leisure is with my best pals. Me, myself, and I. The only people I can rely on to tell me something about myself in relation to the world. These are all some rather strong and controversial claims, and I'm sure you're already chewing on them for yourself, how much of this seems to be true and how much of this seems like total malarkey. But I want to keep going and venture into an even more radical thinker before I come back around to taking or leaving things. Another existentialist figure, one that you've probably actually heard of, was French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. He's famous for the play No Exit, where he famously wrote that hell is other people. I'm familiar with the play, but it wasn't until I read further into his philosophy that I realized that he really, truly believed this. In the book Being and Nothingness, he illustrates what is probably his second most popular writing, the gaze, also called the look. Imagine taking a stroll around a park and another passerby makes eye contact with you. They're not a physical threat, maybe they're even an innocent looking sort, but something about the way they look at you is penetrating and terrifying. The horror comes from the fact that you two have now entered into a metaphysical battle over your own universes. When another human being looks at you, Sartre says, all they have to take in about you is your appearance, your demeanor, your facial expression, maybe how you sound when you talk or what you say. They then use that information to make a decision about who you are down to the core of your being. They seek to define you at the entirety of your existence. You only have two options as a result. You can either accept whatever they think you might be, therefore becoming merely an object in their worldview, or you can turn the tides and reject their assumption. Decide who they are to hold on to your own definition of yourself. Essentially, either you're living in their world, or they're living in yours. This is why other people make the world hell. It's not just any crowd or group where you can lose your identity. It's relying on any other's view of the world at all that keeps us from discovering ourselves. The world would be better off with either only one human being existing or none at all. So, unless you're ready to hit the mind trenches every time you go out and interact with people, you're best off staying at home and trying to complete every stake of every deck in Balatro. Hey, that's the game I'm playing right now. I want to preface before going forward that the interpretations of these philosophers has been my own, and there are and always will be arguments in academic circles about what each philosopher actually meant by their words and to what degree they actually believed or lived by them. It's my own interpretations of these readings that has given me such pause in regards to who I've become and why I might not play video games the way that I do now. A not small part of me agrees with some level of what has been said, and even understands the kind of person it takes to hold them. This steely resolve against the world around you is generally forged in the fires of society at large, or the ones you love, rejecting you for who they think you are. This is undoubtedly why this school of philosophy has become so popular and spilled out into all sorts of cultures. Today, you're going to find more stories about discovering yourself against the grain of what the world is telling you in movies, television, novels, and games than you will in any academic paper or philosophy essay. Everyone's identity has been challenged by someone else at some point, and it hurts. I can empathize with the plights of Kierkegaard and Sartre on a personal level. and I'm sure that you can too. Even if you don't think you're perfect, sometimes it feels easier just to rely on yourself for meaning, purpose, and even entertainment if the other option is putting yourself out there to be frustratingly misconstrued or judged. But also, like me, I imagine that you think on some level these two views are far too extreme. Relying on anyone else for any insight into yourself is a waste of time. Even trying to show someone else something very objective and obvious is simply a fool's errand. The world would be better for you if no one else existed, because at least then you would finally be the undisputed ruler of your kingdom. If you're in a place where you are far closer to accepting these ideas than I am, I understand. Whether it's because you were already introverted or because the world can suck and people can suck, I'm not going to patronize you and call you a selfish, narrow-minded jerk. I hope at the very least we can see that perhaps these two guys have taken a bridge too far. For me, seeing the extreme end of that isolationist path has helped me find a much closer estimate to where I really stand. And it ended up far closer to the middle than I originally anticipated. It's still closer to favoring myself than others, but I'm not in the every man is an island camp anymore. Every man is an archipelago if they want to be. I don't know. To analogize, this experience for me has been like if you said, I don't really think I like disco music. That makes someone else wholeheartedly say, I couldn't agree more, friend. Let's get rid of all disco music and force anyone who has ever made it or enjoyed it to knock it off. Then you say, well, alright, let's not be hasty. I don't dislike disco music enough for it to be completely eradicated. Maybe I just won't listen to it, and everyone else can if they want to. Maybe that example was dumb, and I had already hit the nail on the head the first time. Sorry, I had disco music analogy on my vision board for this script. If I'm going to summarize my new stance and bring this all back to how I experience the interactive flashing lights on my computer monitor, I'll want to say this. I am undoubtedly the sum of my experiences, and I find a lot of comfort in allowing myself to decide who I am. But I don't want that to be the whole story. As grateful as I am to be in a season where I'm looking after myself and loving myself far better than I ever have, I've also been formed significantly by the words and actions of others. It's my relationship to other people that has helped me figure out who it is that I am, what things I value, and what I enjoy. To disregard others' influence on my story would not only be to deny and deceive myself, it would mean shutting out the fact that other people are just as beautiful, complicated, creative, and important as I am. The same should most certainly go for what I do for leisure, which is also a very important part of me in my life. I can say yes to more social multiplayer opportunities without losing myself in the crowd of the lobby. I can join a guild or a group chat without becoming a faceless number. I can take my many single-player experiences and use them to relate to all the other wonderful people who have played the same games, not only to share something fun in common with someone else, but to learn more about how others can see the same thing differently. I will keep playing single-player games most of the time without the shame of wondering if I've closed myself off too much, as long as I keep myself open to sharing more of my time in my life with the right people. I don't have to be alone if I don't want to be, but the joy and solitude of solo gaming is always there when I want it. I sincerely hope that some part of this whole examination has been worth your time. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening.